We're back. We're back. And after I made my list, which if you guys are not subscribed to the newsletter, realize there's like notes and references and suggestions and stuff in our Dragon Common Room newsletter. And last week for the newsletter was some notes that will work for both last week's video live stream and this week's, which is we're still trying to define nation, right? And I confessed in the newsletter that I was a bit grumpy. Did you notice that? At my startup last week, it's like, why is this thing called nation so hard to define, and yet absolutely everybody is convinced they know what it is? Well, I made some suggestions in the newsletter. It's a long list. It kept getting longer because I kept thinking of new ones. My favorite so far element is sense of humor. Nation, there's such a thing as a national sense of humor, don't you know? All that British humor, the alleged German lack of humor. I don't know. Sometimes they're quite witty. It's hard to say, right? But we are here on our quest, continuing for understanding this mystical, and I do think mystical reality. I do think this is a mystical reality of nation. So welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Yes, sense of humor. Sense of humor. The Polandballs get it. Which way? That way. If I gesture to them that way, right? I hope everyone checked out the link. I'm going to like foreground all of this stuff. Like I figured everybody knows YouTube, right? Link is in the description. And I put the Polandball Reddit link in the description last week. I'll put it in again this week. But if you guys don't know Polandball, they solve all the Polandball question, right? That tonight we promised in the live stream description that we were going to answer the Polandball question, which is something like I can has cheeseburger, but
it's the nations defining themselves.
It's the nations defining themselves, yeah. And somehow the Polandballs know, because there's and well, it's like, so what we're showing right now is well, actually, it's the EU looking. I misread it last time. It's the EU is looking at Europe with all of its Polandballs, and America and China. Sorry, it's not America. It's America, right? You got to say it without the A. It's like America, and it has to have the ball has to have its sunglasses on. Sometimes it has hats. Anyway, America and China are asking Europe, like the European Union's like, what are you doing here? And the European Union says, just looking. Suggesting possibly, like, what if all of Europe became one something fill in the blank, right? The Polandball, what is it? Meme? No. System? No. Well, no. I'm just saying, it's like, what are the Polandballs? They're iconic representations of the problem of nation, I think.
Wow. I didn't think that deep about it. I just thought, oh, cute.
Well, so, and the thing is, they are, and I think I said last time, I was talking about one of the first times I saw the Polandballs. There was some joke about here's Merca, and it's talking to its dad, right? Hey, Dad, who's
Oh yeah.
the United Kingdom,
Uh-huh.
and saying, Dad, I just needed to break away, and then something I forget. I spent ages
No, I
searching.
saw it.
I
Yeah.
spent
It
ages
was
and
it,
ages searching my archive for that particular one, and I can't find it. Anyway, the Merca turns around, and Texas is sitting there going, and Merca says, "Don't get any ideas." Right. So the balls, they get it, right? There is such an entity as Merca, and Texas could be a similar kind of entity as Merca. And then the
except it would
EU is possibly the same kind of entity as Merca, but you've got all the other Poland balls of Poland and the UK and Germany and stuff, and they don't want to be subsumed into the EU ball, or do they? Right?
I think it's interesting that and I saw it recently, so you must have found it recently. The America Ball talking to Britain Ball saying, "I just needed to break away, Dad."
Yeah, I found another version of it. There was
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I was so go ahead. Yeah.
This is cased in the idea of a family, because I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what nations are. I think they're families that expand in concentric circles, and the closer you get to the center of it, the more the older that your nation is. At what point does it split off? There's a chain, right?
Yeah.
It's an unbroken chain. In some cases, I think it's just a chain that gets expanded, and more links are added to it. I hear heads exploding everywhere.
Yeah, mine just did.
Disturbance in the force.
Well, I realized, okay, I've been really busy fighting, internet fights in the last 24 hours. Um, the Poland ball that's the cover for this live stream was cooler, and I should have I don't think I can Swiss engineer it to show it now, but it's actually a Poland ball world from like 1779 or something like that, and so they're all different.
Yeah.
And I think what we tried to do last week, if y'all haven't watched last week's episode, go back and do your homework. We went through all of those Euratlas maps of Europe from the year 1 to the year 2000, which are at 100-year intervals, showing how, I mean, if you did it in Poland balls, there'd be bigger ones and smaller ones. In 800, there'd be this giant one being the,
Yeah.
Charlemagne's empire, right? And be pretending to be Rome, but not really. And then it would shrink and split in half. And, the chain, a historian says what we try to do, we try to watch these chains play out, but the sense of relationship, the joke in the one we're looking at right now is that, it's like, to what degree are all of the Poland balls that have been in effect subsumed into China or America one something or other, right? That we have comments, right? And
Yeah, they were great comments.
we thank you for everyone for the comments, and I know we're gonna read some, and Uncouth Barbarian made a nice point, I think, that goes to this problem of defining what the Poland balls are talking about here. He says, "I would contest that you're overthinking the question." Never. Me overthink a question? Are you kidding?
That?
We just started. Or rather, that you're confusing the definitions. Well, see, confusing definitions is our whole problem here, right? It's like, if we're trying to name the Poland balls, like, what are they? What are the Poland balls representing? That's the Poland ball question, right? What are they actually representing? Because you've got a Poland ball for the EU. That's not a nation. You've got a Poland ball for China, which, given the comparison here, is not a nation either. What does that make America, right? That you're confusing the definitions of nation and empire. Interesting problem. When the radical liberals smashed through Europe after the French Revolution. Okay, we did some of that history last week, right? But we're still doing that now. Nationalism would more properly be called statism or imperialism. Now, I think he's confused two definitions, because is imperialism the same thing as statism? Are all states empires? Now, he does, and this we're going to need to unpack a second, right? But he's trying to make a distinction between the nation thing and empire, and comes up with, I thought was a really interesting suggestion. But that does, statism or imperialism sounds, but that doesn't sound romantic. Imperialism might, but anyway, but that doesn't sound romantic. Wouldn't have rallied the people, unified them, and made them one empire. And that, I mean, clearly in the Polandball that we're looking at right now, the EU wants to become an empire. Wait, like the United States and China? America is an empire? Okay. The states of the UK, Spain, France, Germany, Italy, etc., as we know them, are empires ruling over nations. Catalonia, Lombardy, the Scots, the Britons, etc. There, I think he's absolutely right, right? Is there such a thing as an English nation? What happened to Mercia?
Yeah, there is an English nation, but I mean, the word nation has, and he's hit both of them in his comment. It's got two different definitions, right?
Yes.
One means the state, and the other means the people.
Exactly.
Right? So you can have nations that are separate, but they can be controlled under the umbrella of a larger state, a larger nation. So,
or you could have a single nation divided up in multiple states.
Single nation divided in multiple states. That would be
America
us
and England.
Yeah.
Right?
England. Well,
yeah. Oh no! Come on. This is okay. So here,
different because it's a United Kingdom. They still call it a United Kingdom, which is strange because I don't think Ireland ever had a king. I'm gonna get hate mail. I don't really know.
Stop. Tell us in the comments.
Yeah.
We're really trying to get our comments up here. Like, we need to say some more. Keep going. Say some more provocative stuff.
More provocative stuff. And another thing, no, I don't know.
I've been trying to train her to be more, provocative and trolly, and it just won't work.
I try not to be. My earlier training just takes over. So the United Kingdoms, kingdoms are definitely nations, and the king is the head of his people, and it's usually a cohesive people. England is really unique because it had all these other kingdoms that took over each other and kind of absorbed each other, the Angles and the Saxons, and then the Normans. And I think the definition kind of gets lost when looking specifically at that, but the English were kind of a mixture of all of those different kingdoms.
Right, but so is everywhere else. Right. This is why Uncouth Barbarian is right, that, what's Italy, right? It's Venetia, Lombardia, Tuscany, Umbria, Papal States, Sicily, Calabria.
But those people still call themselves Sicilians or Venetians or Napolitans.
So
right?
Italy there's no such thing as Italians. Italy is an empire.
Right. The English people do not call themselves Mercians unless they're Tolkien. Okay, I'll give you that.
Tolkien knew. Right? Tolkien knew.
They call themselves English, but English was a mixture of all these different kingdoms. They all know this, but they call themselves English.
Okay, so you keep doing this to me, and I will actually try to answer this one properly. No, she's trolling me in the right. She knows how to troll me. That's maybe that's the secret. She just gets me going.
Just say medieval.
Oh my gosh, it worked. Darn it. I'm teaching a whole course on Anglo-Saxon England next, and is Anglo-Saxon England tautology or not? Anyway, okay. I kept wanting to hold off on going to the next map because I want to stay with this one, but we can go to the next one. So you're making the claim that England is Wait. Okay, so the United Kingdom, right? The United Kingdom is clearly an empire of other states, which you're saying kingdoms is correct. I mean, a kingdom is a kind of state in the governmental sense, in that it's a state with a monarch, right?
Yes.
And another kind. States, we can have the states. We're a republic. Allegedly, we don't have a monarch. America. But
Mercia, America.
Mercia, America. And see, it's all in the name. It's all in the name. Okay, sorry. I really need to. No, the thing is, nation as the birth group is different from state, which is exactly why Uncouth Barbarian is being very helpful here, right? Unfortunately, he then conflates state and empire, which is a tricky problem, making the suggestion that most of the things we call nations are in fact not even nation states, which I want to get to just in a second, but hold it. They're not even nation states. They're empires absorbing lots of different nations. You're talking about, because you know them, right? You know the subcategories of England, but all of the other regions, we saw that last week, right? All of the other regions of Europe were cobbled together from similar sets of peoples, right? France, most of medieval French history, and I'd have to go back and back in our slides, and I'm not going to do that. Most of medieval French history is the region around Paris. The king has his house in Paris, gradually gobbling up control over all of these other parts of it. And those places are called things like Normandy, Anjou, Aquitaine, Burgundy, Brittany, Gascony.
And that only happened after the Normans invaded, right?
The Normans invade
all the way to
England.
Paris, and then they went back.
Right. Okay. So the Vikings invade and they landed. They're in Normans. So the Normans are actually Vikings, and then the Normans become vassals of the French king, but he's mainly just in Paris in that period.
Right.
And the Duke of, so it's like the fancy titles, right? Is Aquitaine a nation? Because back in maybe I can look at the previous maps. I got the Euratlas here. We'll go back in time. Here we are. Whoops, back in time. Well, I have to turn off the Polandballs. Okay, here we are going back in time. Boop, boop. Okay, this does not help because it made France all pink. That's ridiculous. Okay, useless. Sorry, map. It goes from West Francia to pink. Okay, the pink region in the year 1100 is not politically homogenous in the way that this map is trying to make it seem. And one of the, everybody knows about how evil the French are, how evil the Christians are because of the Albigensian Crusade, which is around Toulouse in the south of France. The real thing that was going on with the Albigensian Crusade was the king in the north trying to take over Aquitaine from the county, right, or the Dutch, Count of Toulouse. It's a conquest. It's literally straight up conquest by France, and you could say, it's bad because it's the French king using the banner of the papacy to do so. Well, so did William the Conqueror when the Normans took over England. So there, right?
Oh yeah, he did.
They had a papal banner, and we're doing it under the because he was Greek. They're doing it constantly. So right. All of these, we showed you last time how cobbled together Germany was from all of those different nations. But France is the same. Spain is the same. They all used to have multiple kingdoms. Now, you could say, as they tried to in the 19th century, oh, no, they might have had multiple states, but it was all one single nation. So Germany, über alles, right? Germany should be the one state that encompasses the nation of all the Germanic peoples. And just because they had all those regional, differentiations of duchies and electorates and archbishoprics and all the different small states of the Holy Roman Empire, they were still Germany. All right. So do you get the sleight of hand?
Yeah, I do, because they're German, not Germany. So I mean,
well, but are they right? Are the Hessians the same people as the Frisians? Are the Prussians?
I don't know.
No, the thing is, this is the game that the nation in the 19th century, and this again, Uncouth Barbarian is right when he says it's after the French Revolution, right? After the French Revolution, Napoleon, who has destroyed all sorts of states, including Venice, right, as a republic, the tide of Napoleon passes back off, and the people left behind are going, who are we? And the question of who we are is melded to, it's like there's the who are we culturally, socially, genealogically, territorially, melded with the and what government should we be under.
I saw something similar right after the fall of the Soviet Union, because
Yes.
the Olympics were held that year, and the poor athletes, they were under a new flag they had no allegiance to.
That's
I
it.
mean, yeah, and it was kind of sad. They were very confused. I mean, they were the ice skaters is what I'm thinking of. They were skating for the Russian Federation, but it was twinged with this kind of sadness because their country was over. Their country that they knew was over.
Very good. That's it. The Soviet Union, my fencing coach fenced for the Soviet Union, but now he's from Kazakhstan. Right. So that sense of we're back to the Polandballs. that sense of empire, right? The EU, if it took over all of these different now states and made them a single empire, would be the same thing as the Soviet Union, China, America, right? These large conglomerations of subset things, Polandballs, whatever they are. But you can have an allegiance. I mean, how many of us feel American, right? We are right. We're exactly like the Soviets.
I do.
Why? I feel American, right? Does that mean I belong to this empire? Is there some subset of that isn't me? It's like the American? I can prove it by the usual genealogical thing of like your ancestors had to be here at X date. Okay, how far back? Right? How far back do my ancestors have to have been here before I count as American?
And how many
three
of them?
centuries? Three generations. Mine, right? Mine. I'm going to hammer this in, right? If anybody gets to be American, I do, because Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Hawkins showed up here first of the English. If anybody else, even before Virginia.
Before Massachusetts?
Yes. Because that's the point. Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Hawkins, they do I think they celebrate Mass, Anglican, in San Francisco. It's not there. San Francisco isn't there as far as I know. Nothing's there, right? The Spanish have been from dates, right? 1492 Columbus. Cortez is conquering Mexico in the 1520s, by which time they have already established settlements and bases and things like Cuba and stuff. Right, they're on the islands.
Right, they had Florida also, like 1565, I think.
Okay, and you're right, they get that. So, but by around that same time, Drake and Hawkins are starting their, raiding piratical activities against the Spanish, and they make it to North America, right? So I say my ancestor, Sir John Hawkins, not only was with his cousin celebrating, the liturgy on the coast of what will be called California later, because California doesn't get set up until even after this. And Hawkins drowns off of Puerto Rico. So, I mean, before he had a son, Richard, and Richard writes the account of what happens, and we're descended, through there, right? Well, a lot of us are. So, technically it's like I'm pretty much the Hawkins lineages are pretty much as American as you can get, based on we stepped foot on this land first and our ancestors are still here. Descendants are still here. Whatever.
Well, then that would also apply to the Spanish, would it not?
Oh, well.
No, they've been there at the same time, right? In a land that was not, but would become America. United States of America. So
precisely, including New Mexico, which I've been reading about.
Right.
I'm still reading about, and there's a lot of really interesting details about how that part of the Spanish Empire. Hey, we'll go back in map time. Whoops, map time. Here we go. Blonde hair, Shimham and Japheth. Here we go. Spanish Empire, right? Yellow bits are, and this is the Spain and the Spanish Indies, right? All of this territory in the West that is held governmentally under Spain, settled by people from Spain with families from Spain. Those people, when in 1846, the American army shows up, and they are given laws by Carney, and Kaerny, laws that are apparently modeled on the American Constitution, which they then accept and become something of the United States. They're not yet a state until 1912.
Territory.
Yeah, territory. Those people have ancestors from the natives who were living there, the Spanish, the natives from Mexico that the Spanish intermarried with and then moved north, the Americans, the Missourians and all the people that it's like that's where I grew up, right? That makes me even more American than everybody else, right?
And you know what? The way you describe them, they sound like the Spanish version of the Scots Irish and English Cherokees.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Because they all intermarry, but it was like English with Cherokee versus Spanish with whatever the names of the tribes are there. I
Right.
think there's a bunch of different ones in New Mexico that I'm not familiar with.
Well, the Pueblos
That's very familiar.
The Pueblos are all the towns, but they're all different nations themselves.
Hmm.
Each town is. They're like
Yeah,
Italy,
right.
nation towns or something,
Yeah,
right? And then the Navajo
yeah,
and the Apaches are more nomadic, and the Comanches.
yeah.
Right.
I drove through it a couple of years ago. It's humongous. The Navajo Nation it's just
Mm-hmm.
enormous, and very empty. Like there's not a lot that grows there. I think they must be very mineral rich, just by the look of the geography there. But there is nothing there. It's a very large area. So when people, if you hear like the nations, it's referring to a people, but it could very well be referring to a small country. It's that
Well,
big.
the Navajo reservation is really big,
Yes,
but there are other there are other smaller
that are
groups,
smaller.
and
Yeah,
some of the as I understand now, the Pueblo towns are like their own little states. Taos and Acoma
right.
and Zuni and Hopi and
That's an interesting place. It
right.
is.
So this is the Polandball question is at what point do it's like is New Mexico part of the United States, right? Um, the but the thing is we're not used because of the way the map has been drawn since 1959 when we had the continental continental states, our states like Texas and Illinois and stuff, and we haven't added any since then. So everyone, younger than me thinks that this is just the way it's always been, right? Don't teach any history, and you don't realize that the sort of process of making this into the political entity that it is, the United States of America,
Mhm.
has been just as complicated as making these political entities of the states in Europe. But thinking France and Italy and Germany and England and Spain are all like real things.
I think it's harder in Europe to do that, which is probably why they've had, well, they're way older than us, but why they've had more wars because, well, we just kind of expanded and absorbed these territories and these people, and then they all became American, right?
Well, the people are
That
really
seems to be
debating that right now, right? Which is why
people
we're
are
having
debating
this
that right
incredibly
now. But I mean,
interminable,
if
long,
push comes to shove,
overdefined
if
question.
you ask people what they were, they'd say I'm American, right? They would.
Well, and that's the sort of, and that, the huge debate politically is, well, does that mean that they're just civic Americans, right? They're citizens of the United States, but they're not really American. And what is, the true, will the
Mm.
true Americans please stand up? Which is again, our Polandball question is how do you know that you belong to one of these cartoon entities, which do seem real? I mean, they have personalities, they have interactions with
Mhm.
each other. You're right, they do have family groups in the way they talk to each other. I hadn't appreciated that properly. But they're also by way of the fact that they can, you can just draw another one and put another flag on it. The thing that the entity with the flag on it makes you realize, oh yes, when the Soviet Union broke up, boop, 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 all sorts of new nations,
Yeah.
but they were always
Well,
already
except they were right.
there.
They weren't new. Right. They weren't new. They went back to what they
Okay,
were.
then there's a
Right.
question like, what's the proper size of a nation? Maybe it's like a block in a city. Maybe it's 3 towns. Maybe it's is Illinois a nation? Is Texas a nation? Is Rhode Island a
It was.
nation? I mean, none of those are
It
nations.
was.
Well, okay, look, we've got
It was a republic.
okay, so one, the confusion that Uncouth Barbarian is pointing to that we need to just say bluntly is the reason that we have this definitional problem or not etymology. It's simply the naming question. It's what's the word for naming? Oh, I know that word.
It's.
Uh,
I want to say patronymic, but
no,
I
no,
don't think
not
that's it.
patronymic. It's just
Um,
like sorry, the name thing, the nomenclature or whatever. But it's something. No,
nomenclature.
it's
There you
not that.
go.
That's the vocabulary or something.
Sure.
Is this 19th century exercise in claiming that you're giving the government, the state, which is the political entity of citizenship and government and all of that, and you're mapping it directly onto the nation, right? So each of these polling balls, I'll go back to the polling balls. I went to the foreign nations of America. Each of these polling balls represents this conceptual entity that has, if it exists as a nation state, is like completely overlapped, right? Spain is the governing of the Spanish by the same government, right? And that's the 19th century fantasy, that we're going to figure out Germany by way of making a nation state.
But I also think there's with respect to the 19th century, there's a very strong language component, because there were movements to revive dead languages as a way to revive nations, like Israel and Ireland. And Germany had its own language, but it wanted to expand more, even than the Kaiser had done, unifying it in the 19th century.
So using language is one of the ways that they try to create this thing, this conceptual thing of
Yes.
we all belong together.
Specifically in the 19th century, though.
Specifically in the 19th century, the default thing that I want everybody to think about and understand is most of your imaginary landscape of reality is devised in the 19th century.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like all of it, right? If you think you know the Middle Ages, please be aware of the fact that most of the historiography was invented in the 19th century to support the claim that these regions were, in fact, being placed under governments that mapped on directly onto this thing that they're imagining as a nation, which will therefore have its own homogenous government. But all of the homogenization is an artifact. I mean, even okay, we're gonna have to okay. So that's the first one. Okay, so Ruler of the Donuts. These are on Twitter, on X. Sorry, I misnamed it.
Okay, that's where they were.
He's saying, okay, so he agrees with me. It isn't quite a rational, easily defined concept. I think we are actually going to get to a definition of it, but it's not rational. You're correct, right? Which is why we keep getting hamstrung. It at some point you can't really rationalize it with a list. It's something you just know. That is why we keep ending up in all the fights about it, right? The Polandballs know. You can draw a Polandball, and America knows it's America, right? And whatever they else. Polandball knows it's Poland. Poland barely exists, right? It keeps getting partitioned all the time. And yet Poland arises, right? So the Polandball is the best image we have of this thing that we're trying to describe. You know it. You just know it. It's real. They can do cartoons about it. But trying to define it will keep breaking your brain. One of the things that Ruler of the Donuts suggested is like, well, okay, so he's trying to say on the one hand, it's a genealogy, which we're going to get to. But on the other hand, is Napoleon French? No, Napoleon's not French at all. But he loved France, so Napoleon's French. Wait. So
I have a problem with that. I have a note on that one. Corsicans are French, right? The Corsican language it's a regional French dialect. So,
are Quebecois French?
Yes,
but they're in Canada.
Although the Parisians don't consider them so, or at least don't consider their language.
At what point does it not count anymore?
They do consider. I think they do consider themselves French, and sometimes they'll say French Canadian, and they'll definitely say Quebecois, but that's the state.
Okay, but if Canada exists as a Polandball, we'll just say Polandball because that's the easier way to say it, right? If Canada exists as a Polandball, is Quebec part of the Canada Polandball?
Depends on who you ask.
Well, somebody on our X thread said Canada's a nation. And not Polandball. We'll just say Polandball. Just say Polandball now. From now on out, do not say nation because we haven't defined it yet. Canada has its own Polandball, but I bet Quebec does too.
Polandballs at least.
Well, at least.
Yeah.
How many Polandballs can fit in a Polandball? I'm really enjoying this as okay. So, but if I love my Polandball, if people, if no matter where my ancestors come from, if I love my Polandball. Oh, you're saying he's actually French because he's Corsican French.
Right.
Okay, so how far out can you go and still get an action, a fragment of the Polandball that still maps onto its parent Polandball?
The Garden of Eden. I mean, you have to go back to the beginning.
Okay,
wouldn't you get the whole thing?
Wait. We had another one. Okay, so one. Mark Lefebvre's given a very long. He ends up with. Okay, well, nations are cultures with similar enough virtues and values to trade without conflict, which makes us economic zones.
No.
Virtues
No.
of trade, come on, that's something. But if we can trade with the whole world, does that not make the one world the whole, a single Polandball? I guess there's a Gaia Polandball. Okay, what was your argument with this?
I'm sorry. Okay, I only have one very short note with a few words that says the European Christian wars begs to differ. That's it.
The European what?
Because essentially, the Christian European wars, in other words, not pre-Christian, but not post-Christian, but Christian countries knowingly fighting other Christians for territory. Now, this came up with a discussion I had with a friend of mine years ago, who, God bless him, he wasn't trying to be malicious or anything like that. It just, and I almost admire this. It was a bit naive, but he thought it was impossible for true Christians to actually fight each other. And
I mean, if you take the way people often talk about the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th centuries, they didn't. Yeah. Well, no, Catholic countries did fight each other. So one's the true Catholic and one's the not. Yes.
The Catholic countries were fighting each other, and I remember I had just gotten back from a trip to Ireland, and I was in Dublin. I was in Christchurch Cathedral, and I saw I think his name is Strongbow. I saw his grave. It's like one of these beautiful big stone sarcophaguses, and he's there. And yeah, he was obviously a Catholic, English, invited over by a Catholic Irish in one of their, wars for dominance. And he married into one of the king's families, and that's how they established. Now that was the first English came there because they were invited, right? Catholic invites Catholic to fight other Catholics to take territory from these Catholics and be dominant over all these Catholics. So yes, they did fight each other. Yeah,
so medieval history is Catholics fighting or Christians fighting each other. It's yes. Yeah. So, right. So his argument that if your virtues are the same and you can trade peacefully, that makes you a nation. That's, I mean, it's a strong liberal desire to think if we can just trade peace, if we can trade together, then we won't have any wars. But that doesn't work either. I'd miss that element. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're getting some pieces here, right? Distinguishing the nation and the nation state is important, but recognizing that empires can have multiple states. I mean, you could have an empire like we do. The United States is an empire because it's the United States with all of our different state governments who all have their own constitutions. Right.
So that's what makes it an empire. It's multiple states under the umbrella of a larger one.
Well, that's the degree to which you count local government, because you could say the Holy Roman Empire was an empire because there isn't a single ruler elected by the electors. The Holy Roman Emperor was not hereditary, although the Habsburgs were it for a long time, but he was actually technically elected and by those different regional powers. And they all had their own government. So yeah, the empire is over a multitude of other governments. But I suppose it's like if you have the Roman Empire, those have provincial governments, but those aren't as separable as like Texas is, I guess. Or are our states actually just provinces? Some of this is terminology. Do we call our states provinces or states? So the United States, an empire, if we call Texas a province, but it has its own government.
There's something dissatisfying to me about this definition of empire, though, because it could apply to a state. Like you said, you've got municipalities and counties, and I mean, Pennsylvania, I think, is pretty famous for having bunches of different types of like ever smaller like units of government in it.
Townships? Is it the township?
State, county,
townships are like in
town.
Vermont or something, right? Or no?
No, they have them in Pennsylvania too, and they have them in New Jersey. They have them in that whole area, the Mid-Atlantic.
I wonder why. Why do they have such similar systems in that region?
That's a good question. They have something in common.
Okay, so no, but this is a good distinction, saying the granularity of the claim is elided when you're claiming Germany is a natural single entity, or even the United States is a natural single entity, right? There's lots of layers in people's political organization.
Hmm.
And the fantasy of the 19th century was match the sense of the people as an entity to that political organization. And then, spending a lot of time in the 19th and 20th centuries rousing up love feelings, patriotism, right, for those entities that are under the single law of the whatever, right? So that you are singing Deutschland über alles, or my country, not my country, tis of thee, Star Spangled Banner, and having powerful emotional feelings about your empire.
Think how hard they had to work to get people to do that, to give that allegiance to the state rather than to a king.
Right? Yeah.
Or to a god, because this was a time when scientism was born, right? Science and the science of political science was going to cause peace to break out everywhere. Mm-hmm. Right. This is the great hope.
Right. The science of politics is going to make peace. That very good. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to solve all the world's problems by putting away superstition and putting away a sentimentality. Right. Mm-hmm. That was. But
they have to create a sentimentality to attach us to those things. Yeah. Statue of Liberty, sonnet. Now we know who we are. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And I still stand by that. That's like their entire immigration policy is because of a poem, right? Because you create these feelings of identity, which is interesting. So could this now, everybody?
It's very feminine energy, I have to say. And so it's appropriate that it's a statue of a lady that this poem is on the base of. That's causing our immigration to explode and do ridiculously harmful things.
But it's the motherland, right? So the feminine images, cities in antiquity are all pretty much always feminine, right? Rome, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the bride of, the Lord, right? The Athena. Mm-hmm. They all have they're brides of the god, for sure. Yeah, interesting. The feminine imagery. But there was something else I was thinking of when you were saying that. How hard they had to work. No, how hard they had to work on this. Mm-hmm. Go back where you were.
I said how hard they had to work to help
create these, yeah.
Right, help create an atmosphere to replace sentimentality with enthusiasm, I guess would be the right word. To enthusiasm for the state, enthusiasm for and this was really easy in America because we were born in blood. That wasn't an easy thing to do for a lot of people, to go to war for years and create an image of yourself anew. So somebody had, I'm forgetting who it was. I think it might have been Ruler of the Donuts. I want to get the name wrong here. Right. Okay. He had said this. They fought the Revolutionary War against Britain. Let's see. I want to read this correctly. All right. He's defining it as American as any member of the four ethnic groups that settled North America from England and fought the Revolutionary War against Britain. Right. But my point I wrote down was that this only applies to the English who fought, the ethnic English who fought.
Right.
Then it would more rightly be called a second civil war.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't. It was something new. It was revolutionary. So it was something new.
Right. But I think that the other point you were making there is we had this discussion in the Telegram chat, DCR Telegram chat, trauma, right?
Yes.
The trauma of blood trauma, there's some high level of, that makes sense to, a nation comes out of the blood trauma for sure.
Yeah.
But okay, hold that thought because that's huge and big. But you were saying, to get this, I think enthusiasm or sentiment, it's creating this feeling, right? And patriotism it's a kind of piety in the ancient Roman sense. You feel pious.
Yes, yes, it definitely feels that way for sure.
It has to, right? It really, really has to. And what Aaron Gross suggested in the X is, I like the single dimensional definition by nationalism scholar Walker Connor. A nation is a largest group having a myth of common ancestry. The largest distinguishes nation from tribe or clan. Okay, so but that's an interesting problem itself. Like what size? I like the Poland balls because they come in lots of different sizes, right?
They do, yeah.
The myth makes this category of analysis rather than a category of practice, but that is what it is, right? And I said history with a hero, right? So what you're describing is the difference between a nation confected out of a feeling of, Robert says, wow, the Lady Mother, confected out of a feeling of common affection, right? Yeah. Versus the nation confected out of a feeling. A hero as the founder of the nation is really important. And I think that's even bigger than, it's not like you call him the father of your nation. You don't necessarily mean that you're all descended from him, unless you're Genghis Khan's family. All of Asia's descended from Genghis Khan.
That is a weird story. 10% of the Englishmen, all Englishmen, that was weird.
Allegedly, Genghis Khan had so many children, right? So it doesn't need to be actual paternity, but the feeling that you have of this hero, founding leader figure, versus the 19th century is desperately trying to create these entities, Poland balls, out of, and the things that you keep pointing to, like language, the things I would point to, like stories. You could have affection for the, well, I don't think they were really, they were trying to figure out how to be an entity after Napoleon had smashed through all of them. The Poland balls go, the Poland balls go all, it's like, it looks like Angry Birds, right?
It's true, but we weren't immune to that either, especially not after the Civil War.
Right. No, so our regional differences are interesting. I think, you create the United States as we are now out of the trauma of, guess what? World War II.
Or was it the Civil War?
Damn Yankees. Okay. I don't know, right? How much, no, and this, okay, so one of the things that you're reading in the Root of the Donuts, he suggests this, and we do need to address this because it's a very important element to this. Mm-hmm. The default learned argument about what's the United States, or the America, right, is any member of the 4 ethnic groups that settled North America from England and fought the Revolutionary War against Britain. But the 4 ethnic groups that settled North America from England. 4, right? So how can there be 1 when there's 4 to start with? We've already done a blend, right?
Well, I think it meant from Britain, right? The 4 ethnic groups from Britain, maybe? It meant English, Scottish.
Right, but the entire claim that we are usually up against is there's one nation, it's America, we know who we are, it's the people whose posterity, it's the people for whom the Constitution of the state empire, the United, it's so funny because like we hamstrung with ourselves with the name, United States of America, okay, so we're a united set of states under one legal entity, which is in fact therefore from the beginning an empire because it's multiple states to start with.
Yeah, they were radically different from one another. Their cultures were because of the different religious practice, but also because of the different. I don't want to say political.
Oh, shall we do it? Come on, it's a big book, guys.
Well,
you must read this book. Big book.
The Puritans were very different from the Cavaliers, who were very different from the Quakers, very different. And yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to quiz you. Explain to the people what you're saying. I've got the map up of the East Coast Colin Woodard map, right? Mark Lefebvre asked, I'm surprised you didn't talk about Colin Woodard. We're getting to it. Right now, we're just doing David Hackett Fischer, right? That there are, you're saying 4, but I thought there were 13 colonies.
There were 13 colonies, right? But the waves of immigration came in 4 major waves.
Okay.
So the Puritans in New England.
Okay.
And what had been their arch nemesis during the English Civil War were the Cavaliers, or the Royalists.
Yes.
In Virginia,
yes.
The Tidewater.
Yes.
And
okay, so people looking at the map, the Yankeedom is dark blue, Virginia Tidewater is yellow. It's its very own nation all by itself.
Yeah. And then you had the Quakers of Pennsylvania, who basically let anybody in. They just
they're so tolerant.
For all those English nationalists out there, they were the ones that were the problem.
Everybody hated the Quakers.
they would take anyone, and they did,
The Dutch, they took the
something
Pennsylvania Dutch, right? That's why
they
that's
took the pious Germans, right?
yes.
But then they took the borderlanders, and they kept pushing them.
Well, the
back
Hawkins, so
as far
Hawkins,
away as they could.
the Hawkins family comes with the Virginia Tidewater guys, so they're like hierarchical and snooty. Okay. I have no idea how we managed to marry into that family, right? We're the
Yeah.
rabble. The
They
Fultons.
really were rabble. And they pushed them as far west as they could, as was legal and not legal to do so, because there were treaties they weren't supposed to be breaking with the Indians, and they weren't supposed to be going into what became Ohio and places west of Ohio into Illinois and
Are you
Kentucky.
saying my family that started off in the Fultons started off in Loudoun County, Virginia, which apparently is like famous right now for like school board debates. So we know the Fultons are in Loudoun County. They're there during the Civil War, and then they moved west, naughty, into southern Illinois, and they end up in like around where St. Louis is, Alton, right near Ferguson, right? We're at the center of everything. You can blame us completely, but Presbyterian, right? Because these are Ulster Presbyterians, and the dark red of Greater Appalachia tended to vote for Trump a lot. And those people are, in fact, Woodard points this out. I like making this point because it's a very interesting thing. When asked who they were, I mean, maybe the New Englanders would still say they were English ancestry. The Virginians probably know that, right? I'm not sure about the Quakers. The border Greater Appalachia people all said American. Well, who, right? What kind of American? We're American. What are you talking about? It's like they've been pushed out. Okay, so guys, you need to read this book. But what Casey just sketched for you is the problem of where the United States comes from is, of course, these English colonists, and they're not the only colonists, right? We got the French there, we got the Dutch in New Amsterdam, got the Spanish down in Florida, right?
Oh, yes, right. By the way, there were already other Europeans and lots of American Indian groups already here when the English got here. So there were lots of fights for many centuries,
and very detailed like interactions. I mean, it's fascinating to me that we don't know more about that on the ground history. I wonder why. Could it be the 19th century? Could it be the homogenizing creation of a particular national myth called history that they don't teach in school anymore, right? Because it all came out of Boston. No, shush. Okay, so but what David Hackett Fischer is doing is undoing a lot of that homogenizing of our national narrative. And when I read his book 2015, I was like evangelical about it. I was like, I get everything about our politics now. It's the regional difference.
You know what's really fascinating? Get this book and read it.
You just got to read it.
But it's
worth reading.
Totally worth it, though. It's totally worth it. Some of the names of the old Virginia families that came over as second sons and had lots of land are still names that you would recognize in politics today. And yes, they are related. Directly. Yeah. It's shocking how many of them there are still there. Jimmy Carter just died. He was one of the old Virginia families. They moved down after they moved down and took over the land that Jackson had cleared after the Trail of Tears. They took over that land, but they were from Virginia originally.
Okay, and so we have various things, like you got to look up the chronology, which is on page 804. It's a long book. You really need to learn some history, right? And particularly if you really want to understand the divisions among our English cultures. It's plural, it's not singular. And when I was pushing Casey a bit in the back, it's like, where are the Mercians from? Nobody comes from Mercia. It's the Midlands. Tolkien stays there. He hates America. He did. He disliked the American cosmopolitanism. He said it was making everywhere the same, right? So it was. Well, gee, didn't everybody learn that from London? Well, empires do that, right? They homogenize by building the same kind of building everywhere. That's one thing Prince Charles got right, by the way. Now King Charles, he wanted to save London's architecture. But anyway, go on. Okay, so the major myth of England is that the kingdoms that were established by the various peoples that migrated after the fall of Roman Empire and before the Vikings showed up, that those people are homogenized into a single kingdom. But the civil war that takes place in what 1629 to 1660 or thereabouts, the 11 years. Okay, anyway, the 17th century civil war on the island in England proves that these people are not, in fact, all homogenized, right? The people that settled in East Anglia, which is where Angle land comes from, England. So basically, if you're, from around Cambridge and East Anglia, you're true English. And then you want to go and live in Massachusetts, Cambridge, Massachusetts, because, that's the same place in New England, right? That region is very, very different from, for example, Wessex, which is on the right-hand map, the lower orange bit. That's where all of the old Saxon kings came from, King Alfred the Great and his, fight against the Vikings and things like that. That region is, still, politically and ethnically significantly different from East Anglia. East Anglia was a lot of townspeople, a lot of trade with the continent. They trade across the North Sea to Frisia. Old English, sounds like Frisian. So, is Frisia part of England? Who knows? You can apparently, according to a video I saw on YouTube, if you speak Old English, the Frisians can understand you to this day. Okay, so
Oh, wow.
yeah, so the old, that's the same people, nation. Who knows? The Midlanders and the North. Now those people are more mixed in with Danes because the Danes in the second wave they settle around York. They settle in the pink bit, right? Those Midlanders who go in and become Quakers, right? It's sort of complicated. They would not necessarily be they don't necessarily think of themselves as Wessex people. I mean, English politics to this day has these regional differences. And then the Scots-Irish borders, well, we know Braveheart, right? Everybody put your hand, you've seen Braveheart, right?
Yes.
Those, I mean, the one, okay, the battle scenes, my dad walked out, he was so mad, maybe needed a cigarette. Long movie.
Or maybe he needed a cigarette because he got so mad.
He was really mad about the Battle of Stirling Bridge having no bridge in the movie. That the true thing that they're showing is the degree to which the English kings were, raping the land and the people, probably. But the Scottish kings didn't necessarily do any better at protecting the borders. So the borders, when first they go to Ulster, Northern Ireland, and then they say, excuse me, you, and they leave. Well, actually, they're kicked out. After the Union of England and Scotland in 1707, the North Britons moved to the back country, and those become the Appalachians, and they don't trust anybody.
No, and they have no reason to trust anybody, and they just wanted to be left the hell alone, and that is the American character right there.
Well, some of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's Fisher's point, that all of these are American characters, but politically, and he spends a lot of the last part of the book showing you can predict presidential elections.
Oh yeah,
by these groupings, right? And if you think of them as binaries, you completely miss the point. They're temporary alliances between these different regions. So do we hate this group more than that group this time? Well, we'll vote together, right? But
sorry about that. I have to just notice I have to plug in. Oh my goodness.
Are you running out of battery?
I didn't realize I wasn't plugged in. Sorry.
That these regional fights literally continue to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely continues today. If the people in New England hate with a burning passion the people in, I don't know, redneck country,
and vice versa.
Oh yeah, damn Yankees. Right? It's still part of our character, right? It's like we're an empire cobbled together from groups of people that only in one situation hated the British more.
Yeah.
Right. And the Canadians decided they didn't hate the Britons so much. And so they stayed, allied with them. But it's like, those are all, it's like, talk about family lineage. Which family? You can say my Hawkins family, the West people, you said that. So the people that settled in Virginia, they're still there. Right. They didn't really move west very much. At Great Appalachians, they did. They moved west. You could see it on the map. The Midlanders, they move west. The Yankees go from New England to Seattle. Although Seattle
Well,
Seattle gets a mix of
Texas.
they end up there's in the full Woodard map, which I hope I have. There's the coastal countries. Oh yeah, here I got. Where's yeah, here I go. Here we go. We can turn the page. Here we go. The big blue so Chicago where I am is interesting because it's in the Yankeedom land, which means like there's cultural preferences and expectations that fit in Chicago that don't fit further south in Illinois, because Illinois is both Midlands, and if you go far enough south down, you end up at the Fultons again, right? Because the greater Appalachia cuts across it again. So our political entities of our states do not map directly onto these regional cultures. And that also explains internally the politics of these different regional states. It's like, why does everybody in Southern Illinois hate Chicago?
Yeah.
Rednecks versus the damn Yankees. Again. I mean, still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just the Appalachians versus everybody else, right?
Well, that too, right. And the thing is, they're Presbyterians, so they get these like camp meetings. Okay, so one of the interesting things to explain all of this. Okay, so if you've seen, I'm hearing you're echoing. You're echoing.
Oh, sorry about that.
Put your headphones on.
If it's my...
Okay, so one, if you look at my favorite part, which we're not going to talk about in detail, is what happens in that light blue bit down there that goes up the Rio Grande to Santa Fe and is down there in Chihuahua and south of in north Mexico and stuff. That region, Colin Woodard calls El Norte. As far as the Mexicans to the south are considered, those norteños are more American than they are Mexican. It's like these border people end up fitting nowhere because they marry everybody, and you know. So and
the border moves, doesn't it? Occasionally.
Well,
it's the same thing with the Northeast. I mean, the border moves. There are counties where people speak French up in Maine.
Right. So the political border moves. The people can be living, on either side of the political border, but the regional differences are still incredibly powerful. And then when it's like we're trying to describe what's a nation, it's the people that share, let's say, values and culture and social expectations and such like that. By the end of this, hopefully you're going to believe it's a miracle that the United States exists at all, because it kind of is. But to describe...
Yeah.
Now this is...
There are some miracles. That's a different show.
We might... I mean, come on, let's bring in Canada. So...
How many times did George Washington have his horse shot out from underneath him?
I think,
for instance,
the trauma of fighting the Common War, and Scots-Irish were very helpful in that. They fought longer than anybody else, more bloodier, because they've been practicing. I hated the English so much.
The unifying factor is how much you hated the English, is whether or not you have your own country. So the Canadians didn't hate them enough.
It's not love, it's hate.
The people, yeah, it's hate's the unifying factor here. But the New Englanders hated the Virginians, but neither one of them hated each other more than they hated the English. So,
sort of. I think the Virginians they kind of enjoyed being in charge, since it's all like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so everybody. So we've got some chat going on. Robert is there. They've all gone silent, right? Guys, are you still there? Okay, so everybody's here. Let's take roll. Hello, Rogue Wave. Glad to see you here. Sanjuro, hello. Robert. The image of children playing in the now banned ballroom at McDonald's. Do nations have guardian angels? Very good question. Do Poland balls have guardian angels? Oh, definitely. Right. Do empires have guardian angels? That's a nice way of setting the question up. It's like the angel of. Right. And in Revelation, the letter is written to the different angels of the cities. So
did they mean angels, or were they actually speaking in code and talking about bishops?
So
because I've heard that
there's a long argument about Christological
angelology.
Yeah, that Jesus is an angel. Not Jesus. Christ, the Lord is an angel, and he's the angel of Israel. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace is
The guardian of
the
Israel
angel.
is Saint Michael.
Well, they're all parts of El. Michael, Raphael.
Okay.
So are even the angels separable? Angelology is a good parallel problem of nations. Well spotted. Yes. No, it seriously is, because in antiquity you have this sense that the city or the people have an angel, and if the Polandballs are identified with their angels, that solves the problem. Doesn't solve angelology, but at least it solves the Polandball question.
So who's the angel of Mercia then? The kingdom of Mercia?
Ask Tolkien, right? Well, and the thing is,
he's unavailable for comment.
no, but the in medieval Europe you have saints, right? And so they are the patrons, right? That characteristic of having a patron saint has some. This is a very good insight. Thank you, Rogue Wave. That this gives us some sense of, like, we should be, here we go to the next picture because it's got the whole of North America, right? Why not just have this be Our Lady of the Americas, right? And that define, the Lady of Guadalupe is Our Lady of the Americas. The Immaculate Conception is our patroness. Yeah. Solved the problem. Who are we? The people of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Well, yeah, patroness of the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's you have the Immaculate Conception. Yeah.
Yeah. So good spot. Okay. So that's Robert has said no individual children of God do. The angel of Israel will be a theophany of Jesus. We clearly need to revisit this question. This is a good one. Okay. They talked about that for a while. Rogue Wave says, I believe Catholic teaching is that nations have guardian angels assigned to them. Casey says yes. Okay. So Rogue Wave wins that round. Mm-hmm. And the Polandballs rejoice.
As you call the United States an empire because it's an umbrella over 50 different states, and because the United States has we do have a guardian angel. I actually thought it was Michael, but our patroness is the Immaculate Conception.
So yeah.
So maybe empires can have guardian angels too. I don't know.
See, I'm just getting happier and happier with my Polandball thing. It just solves everything, because you start feeling it, right? You feel it's like, why are the Polandballs funny? Because they capture something of this mystery, right? And entities like the angels are a recognition of this problem. It's the egregor phenomenon that people have been talking about, right? It's like these emergent identities from collectives. So cities can have egregors or angels or Polandballs. There could be Polandballs of the cities. New York should have its own Polandball. It's these emergent collective identities. They're meant to be kind of mystical and occult and stuff, but most you can tell what they are. To say, can you feel the city? I know who Chicago is, right? It took me a long time to feel Chicago. It took me like a decade or so to like it. It took me a little longer to fall in love with it. Interestingly, I fell in love with New York instantaneously. Landed there, maybe because we had like ancestors, the Wincoops, that were living there in New Amsterdam before it was New York. I have fallen in love with Los Angeles over the last year or so because I recognize that she needs help. Right? It's like Our Lady of the Angels. She's buried under all sorts of layers of lost attention. She's still there. She's still there. Or the wrong. Anyway,
it's when I look at Los Angeles is cluttered under concrete and wires of old technology, and it's almost like you just want to take like a cloth and remove all the old makeup off of it and just scrape it clean and let it shine. That's the way it should be. Right?
They should be beautiful. The nations are beautiful and glorious. And okay, Rogue Wave and Robert have been having their own parallel conversation, which is useful to us. Robert says, Rogue Wave says, I think perhaps a common bond of suffering, struggle, trauma often creates a strong bond capable of forming a nation. Yeah, I think the trauma key is interesting there. William South says Brian Boru was the first High King of Ireland.
Was there a second?
I'll ask him. Was there a second? Robert's saying nations are projected and taught. It's like somehow Chicago is a real thing, right? And it does have, if enough people love it, it takes on a joyous character, right? I think people hate LA because they come and they want to like get something from it or something like that, rather than love and take care of it. So there's this literal cultivation of the city, which is what you're describing. It's like, instead of being cultivated and cared for and loved, and like, I have this plant that my husband's colleagues gave him when his father died, and I've fallen in love with the plant. I find it very strange. I've never fallen in love with the plant before. That feeling of like, I mean, my dog, that's easy, right? Plants, the Tolkien loved the trees. And a tree lives in a place, right? Big tree in the place, right? Place. Falling in love with the place is very similar. It's extending this sense of, when my grandparents' town got caught in the fire last February, and I was crying because I could feel the town. Something happened to the town, not the buildings, not the people. The town was surrounded by fire, screaming. It was the strangest experience I've ever had of feeling one of these realities, right? If we name them, they do have they come into more focus if we can name them, I think. Rogue Wave saying, the problem, we've lost monarchies. Nations are inclined to conglomerate around the aristocracy, particularly strong and holy monarchs. Those are two different things, an aristocracy and a monarchy, because the monarchy is the hero character, ideally, that people are collected around. And the aristocracy, I think, has a different role. But you need an aristocracy to love its people. And that is the huge problem we have right now. Most of the aristocrats of the world hate humanity, right? The rest of us.
Right.
Rogue Wave says, I believe St. Michael is the guardian angel of Israel. Can saints be angels? Saints occupy the vacuum left by the fallen angels. Fertility of place. Okay, I'm caught up, sort of. Okay, so the Polandball question is coming into focus. Yeah, feel that? But it's still like, why did I feel like I had needed 30 items to describe the entity Polandball? Shall I lit?
Because the definition expands along with the people, right?
Well, it's not just it's not just bigness, right? There's something else in that existence of feeling, right? It's a feeling of attention, identity. It does seem to need to be tied to a particular geographical place. On the other hand, peoples can move, right? There are peoples that have, nomadic nations that move around. So that's tricky. Should I okay. I can read out what I made of my list of the nations. So we'll just demonstrate the problem of my list. Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing on my own iPad. Oh, there we go. You can go to the newsletter in the Mosaic Ark. What is a nation? And they're all here. Okay. So, and with cartoon Polandball the America trying to be all Polandballs. Okay. So Rachel's list of the properties of that mystical thing we call nation. This is 32 items at the moment.
That's a lot.
I will not talk them all through. I'm just going to read them into the internet. I will try not to comment so that we get through this in a minute.
And I'll
Kinfolk, with question about how marriages count, how far back the ancestors go, and whether patrilineal or matrilineal or both. 2. History, dependent on choice of framing identity, possibly circular. 3. Territory, but with question of whether conquered or settled, length of settlement. 4. Law, as applied to a territory and or a people. 5. Culture, including religion and worship. 6. Ruler, depending on whether he or she rules over many peoples, could count as both nation and or empire. I guess both state and or empire. 7, mores, customs, rituals of social interaction, manners. 8, language, whether singular or plural. 9, art, architecture, music, images. 10, names. 11, physical appearance, including clothing and hairstyles. 12, diet, cuisine, agriculture, animal husbandry. 13, technology. 14, media and communication, orality, literacy. 15, intelligence, skills, education. 16, temperament, personality. 17, sense of humor or lack thereof. 18, plants and animals, crops, herds, pets, attitude towards plants and animals. 19, social structures, classes, castes. 20, sports, games, pastimes. 21, dances, mating rituals, courtship. 22, emotions, facial expressions, gestures. 23, myths, legends, stories, literature. 24, heroes. 25, philosophy, theology, metaphysics. 26, virtues and vices. 27, work ethics, labor, ideas of wealth, money. 28, values. 29, government, power, politics. 30, anthems, songs, poetry. 31, use of violence, warfare, military culture. 32, attitudes towards other nations and strangers. 33, ... Right. And we could literally do an episode on every single one of those easily, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I challenge you, at some point, any one of those can be used by people to say that's nation, right? It's the kinship, it's the territory. Okay, sometimes you group them, right? It's the kinship and the territory, right? But then kinships can move, right? So do they have to have a particular territory or, the law? But you could have multiple people living under the same law that just like, is that an empire? Or is that a nation, right? If you all have all the same law. We, the people, make this law for all of us and our posterity to live under, but maybe we're multiple nations living under this one law. You could have a single ruler ruling over multiple nations. The queen of England, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, various islands, stuff like that. Right? You don't think the queen, I mean, many medieval monarchs have multiple nations that they are monarch of, right? So they're I haven't thought of it. I was talking to some of my neighbors who work in our administration for like course catalogs and stuff, and they were saying there's all these cross lists and all the courses. It's like, am I in a history class or I'm in a religion class? Well, I'm cross listed with Romance languages and public policy, and we can and they're talking about all these cross lists, right? Cross listed kingdoms are constant. Because like the kings of England claimed to be kings of France for ages, right? And went to wars over trying to pretend that they were.
Until 1992.
Yeah, right?
That still cracks me up. Yeah.
Or, even a single language is not even like dispositive, I think is the word, to say, okay, so everybody who speaks the same language is the nation. Well, no.
No,
right?
Definitely not.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but on the other hand, the Polandballs exist, right? So how do we get in our heads the complexity of, we know those Polandballs are real, but whenever we try to define them, the terms slip into complexity. Well, that's what David Hackett Fischer tried to do when he made a different list.
Yeah, he did a good job.
Right. So I'm showing on screen now his list of the empirical indicators that he used to try to talk about. I'll keep it on screen. I won't go to the four. Okay, so his 4 nations have all of these properties, right? So we're doing Aristotle here right now. You have a thing that you've named that has a substance. The Polandballs are substances. How's that, right? And
okay.
and they have properties or accidents that include all these other things, right? And attaching the properties to the substance is the exercise of description. And in describing these different national substances, the Polandballs, Fischer uses these. Are we ready for another list? Everybody says yes. Yes, Rogue Wave says, I live deep in Pennsylvania Amish country, and they are definitely a nation unto their own. Precisely.
Yeah.
Right? They're
Yeah.
under the government of Pennsylvania, which is under the government of the United States, but they're their own
And,
nation.
and they have separate agreements with that government when it comes to things like medical care and education.
As the other subnations in the country do, like the Navajo, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the Lumbee now, is that right?
Lumbee, yeah, North Carolina. Yep.
Okay, so in order to define substance Polandball, these are the things that Fischer says you need to deal with. And he calls them folkways. Speech, which means pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar. And he then does a lot of data collection, right, on all of these. So, but those are quantitative indicators. I'll just read the qualitative ones. So speech includes pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar. Building, styles, plans, method, materials. He has a really interesting thing about the different town layouts in these different regions, how they're completely different. Family, family ideas, language, and law. And again, you think they all came from England, right? Well, they're different. Marriage,
different.
courtship and marriage customs, gender, ideas, and language. Do you want to know, chat people, why we're having such big fights over gender right now?
Because the English language is too imprecise.
No, because the different nations have different gender expectations, and America, Greater Appalachia, has very strong masculine and feminine imagery and ideals. Yes. Country music, for example. New England doesn't. The townspeople there tend to have much less marked differences between masculine and feminine.
The Quakers were even more kind of neutral that way.
Right.
They really believed in almost like modern equality between the sexes.
Well, that's where it comes from, right? It's that cultural norm, and the Greater Appalachians are like, you're nuts, right? So these are really big problems. Sex, ideas, and language, similarly. Naming, qualities of namesakes, how you figure out who belongs to who, right? Like child rearing, ideas of child nature and nurture, ideas of age relations, death, ideas of fatalism, religion, worship rituals, church architecture, magic. He has whole sections on magic on each of these. It's very interesting. Learning, institutions and rituals. Like, we get in big debates over language. Like, it's better not to have a Department of Education, because really we're very local in our convictions on how children should be raised and what kind of education you should give them. Right. Literacy, attitudes towards literacy and morality. I, being the, book learned whatever I am, that I grew up in the region that I did, on the one hand, great respect for the preacher man and his learning, zero respect for book learning and all those big words. I learned to use my vocabulary very precisely in different situations. You can imagine, right? And the thing is, it's like the book learning big words, they don't trust people coming to bamboozle them with that fancy language. They know what's going to happen. They're going to steal your property.
Yeah. Right. So it's all about stealing your land, which is,
Foods, cooking, and eating methods. You know why, we love KFC so much? Apparently that's batter fried food is Scots Irish. Scots.
It's just a big plate of heaven. It really is.
Dress, sumptuary laws, favorite. Dress norms. Everybody want to dress in Ralph Lauren. That's, color ways of New England. So there you go. Sport, common games, ideology of sport, work ethics, time, ideas of time, calendars, holiday, wealth, and ideas of wealth, inheritance, intestacy rules, like even defined as like property and family. Who counts as family and how does the property pass down? It's different in these different regions, right?
Yeah.
Rank, criteria, language, rituals of rank. My goodness, if you don't understand the rituals of rank in Virginia, you are in big trouble. Very hierarchical.
You won't get far. Yeah.
What?
I said you won't get far if you're trying to like break into society there. You just won't.
But the Great Appalachia, I mean, I kept, it's like, I understand a lot of things. So I've used this book many, many times, and I can set up in class, like I will, quiz them on the basis of the last one here, freedom, right? Your ideas about the appropriate place of government. Stay out of it. They should stay out of our business. Oh, everyone should give a little bit of their property to help each other. Oh, well, it needs to be higher. There's a clear hierarchy. Or, oh, well, we just need to get along and tolerate everybody. Those do not mix. Oil, water, Yankeedom, Midlands, Greater Appalachian, Tidewater, Virginia, do not mix. And a good deal of our political culture is those different conversations. And I can pinpoint 2 counties sometimes. It's like, why are you talking that way? I know where you're from. It's very durable. Order, association, ideals of settlement, order, ideas of order and ordering institutions, power, institutions of local government, and freedom, libertarian ideas and customs. They are not the same.
Yeah.
It's such a fun game once you start this, right? Okay.
Yeah, New England in particular has made a point in this book was very, their society was it was so very strict. He felt almost like strangled reading about how people had to live because they were tasked with accounting for every bit of time they spent doing something, and everything had to be for a reason. And everybody had to be unified on the government and how everything was run
in New England.
And
yes.
In New England, and I just can't help but think that is part of what's behind this kind of. How do I put this? This movement over the past, I want to say 50 years, because I think it probably started with the women's rights movement more than anything else.
It definitely comes from that region. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of evolved into what's now thankfully collapsing, which is this kind of culture of cry bullying. Right? You have to do what everybody says you have to do because we're emotional and we mean it, and we have to be unified. We have to be unified because that's my entire identity is making sure everybody is unified. And you will all be unified under what is important to me, right? That seemed to be the attitude over the past, particularly over the past 15 years, I would say 10 to 15 years. It kind of reached this crescendo up into the last election, where everybody was just like, we're really just so done with this now. Right. It's just
but the people from that region who find that like their Polandball loves that stuff. Right.
They do.
They really, really do. It makes them feel safe and a clear identity.
Order. Everything is
their order.
Everything.
Their Puritan idea of order and unity. Right. It's like,
well, the word, the name itself says it all. Pure. It's purity. It's purity. Everything's a purity test.
Yes. And they're very, they're very, very frustrated if you, okay. So you got to read this book. Right. The fun thing about it is because Casey was saying, he goes through very deliberately through all those things I just read you out. There's a section on each one 4 times over. Right. So, and the speech one is my favorite. Right. It's like, I was going to,
mine too.
Oh my gosh, the speech. Let's just prove the speech. We do not all speak the same language. Okay. Just get that out of your head. Okay. But what's interesting is, okay, everybody, you've always heard, cause you have that, in Appalachia, they speak like Shakespeare. No, I don't think he was from the Midlands, not from the border, right? But the truth of the matter is, and this is, Fischer did so much interesting work with this. Every single American regional accent is mappable to one of these English regional accents.
And that's why I read the book, because when I first met you in your Telegram chat, I was talking about etymology, and I was talking about how I was explaining to someone, where accents come from and where the pronunciations of certain words come from. And you said, oh, you're going to love this book. And I really did. And I read it, and I recognized in some of the New England speech patterns, some of the ways that some people in my family will say words like idea. Like, I swear, until I was 10 years old, I thought it was pronounced idea.
Yeah,
I thought there was an R on the end of that word until somebody corrected me. And come to find out, yes, that's from a very specific place in England. In fact, I think it's East Anglia.
Yes. So, and it's like My Fair Lady. Yeah. It's My Fair Lady, right? Henry Higgins, and he's going to teach Eliza Doolittle to talk, and Henry Higgins can locate people with their accents from regions in England. Yes. Well, guess what? They all came here and spread out in different forms. And so
Right. And in my family's case, it was my mother who had pronounced the word that way. And her family goes way back to Connecticut to the Puritans, like 1640.
Brilliant.
So
Proof of concept.
Time.
This is
Right.
yes, this is great, right?
Right. So I found it really fascinating. So yeah, if you can think of anything like that, like why does somebody pronounce the word like that? It'll probably tell you in this book.
It does. So for example,
Yeah.
The rhyme schemes of New England poets in the 17th century and 18th centuries tell us that glare was pronounced glar, hair was har, air was r, and war rhymed with star. War, star, right? Other common pronunciations were hev for have, yesterday for yesterday, general for general, dafter or darter for daughter, drowned for drown, and so forth, right? So there's like the thing is it keeps going, right? So we'll go to okay, the Wessex people, right? Speech, right? It is okay, speech ways, right? Here's Virginia speech ways, right? For example, like consonants were also softened and prolonged, as in Sieben for seven, Chimbly for chimney, vomit for vermin, holt for hold, mow for more, flow for floor. I get into trouble. There's one part in here where I like reading. It's very there was a okay, the Virginia dialect also has its own vocabulary. Examples recorded as early as the 17th century include bide for stay, howdy for hello, afterclap for any unexpected event, shuck for husk, poorly for unwell, drag for harrow, craw for throat, afeared for afraid, and blah 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 blah. He gives lots of examples. Right?
Yeah, and some of these words I do use. Like I've heard the word craw, something stuck in your craw, right?
And then
usually means you're irritated. Yeah, it has a different meaning other than just stuck in your throat.
When you start realizing that things you thought of as simply true are these regional differences. So
yeah, fascinating.
The Delaware Valley, social, it's like speech ways, ethnic origins, religious origins. Where's the friends? Come on, give me speech. Pen's elite, family ways, building ways, speech ways. Okay, here's this is Delaware. Things like not only pronunciation but also the vocabulary of the English North Midlands became part of the American Midland speech. In the word lists of Cheshire, Derbyshire, Lancashire, and Yorkshire, we find the following terms, all of which took root in the Delaware Valley. Abide, as in can't abide it. All out for entirely. Apple pie order, to mean very good order. Bamboozle for deceive. Black and white for writing. Blather for empty talk. Boggle for take fright. Brat for child. Oh, Brat Summer was Delaware. There you go. Right. Again, it goes on and on. But my favorite, then we get to, right, the, here we go. My people, come on. Fulton's, where are you? Loudoun County, right? Naming ways, gender ways, marriage ways, family ways, building ways. Oh, come on. Where's the speech ways? Elite. You're all going to want to read all of this. Environment, American backcountry, border origins. Ack. Okay, sorry. I will find it. You'll watch me. Power ways, order ways. By the end of the book, you remember all of these different ways. You like time ways, sport ways, food ways, learning ways, literacy,
courtship,
magic ways. Oh, there's all these great ones.
Magic was really interesting.
Eating cornbread causes pellagra. I don't know what pellagra is. For scurvy, apply uncooked potatoes sliced and soaked in vinegar. Okay, these are magic ways from the backcountry, right? Religious ways, death ways, age ways, naming ways, gender ways. How they have marriages in the backcountry. Family ways, building ways. Speech ways, here they are. Okay, the Southern Highland speech has long been very distinctive for its patterns of pronunciation. It says war for where, thar for there, hard for hired, critter for creature, sartin for certain, a goin for going, hit for it, he it for hit, Far for fire. See, that's why we can never agree on how many syllables there are in fire.
It's true.
Far. It's one.
Far.
Far. How many syllables are there in fire? Fire. Right? Deaf for deaf. Poison for poison. Naked for naked. Each for itch. And so forth. Right? And then you... Okay, you guys, the Rogue Wave and Robert are started talking about what drinks and names. Right? Okay. So you can... What Fischer does is he parses down all of these, and let's go back to that one that Casey was talking about, shame.
Was I talking about shame?
Oh yeah, the bullying and the shaming, right?
Oh, that
right.
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
so
shaming,
here we go. Neighboring was a verb in Massachusetts, which described social acts of high complexity. The spirit of a New England neighborhood was summarized in a proverb by a descendant of the Great Migration, Benjamin Franklin. Love your neighbor, said Poor Richard, but don't pull down your fence. This Yankee proverb was not invented in New England. In England, a century earlier, George Herbert had written, love your neighbor, yet pull not down your hedges. Okay, fences and hedges, right? One might recognize a ring of modernity in this system, but in other ways, the comity of early New England was far removed from systems of association in our own time. This was especially the case in regard to social reputation, which was urgently important to the Puritans, as to most others of their age. The social cement of their world was a sense of belonging that's massively powerful for the Polandball of New England, and an intense fear of shame, which was the emotion felt when reputation was lost. E. Michael Jones is writing the book on Nathaniel Hawthorne. These guys, right?
Okay.
Punishments were meant to promote a sense of shame. Shame! Shame! You want to feel like, so we want to feel this one, right? Fornicating couples were sometimes compelled to stand in white sheets before the congregation and confess their sins. Drunkards were forced to wear a great shame letter D made of red cloth and set upon white to continue for a year. Serious offenses were punished by excommunication, in which every member of the church was ordered to forbear to eat and drink with him, and life became an agony of isolation and shame. The opposite of shame was honor. So that Puritan sense of shame, you feel it in the way some of our political culture still plays out now. It's like, how are you going to get people to behave as you want the group to?
Yeah, you ostracize them.
If you're from New England, you're going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. What about if you're from the Tidewater Anglicans? Doop, doop, doop. You can look it up in the index, 397. Okay. There's some shame, but there's a lot more honor in theirs. Honor in Virginia was compounded of two ideas. One of them was what historian Bertram Wyatt Brown calls primal honor, which meant physical courage and tenacity of will. In short, honor is valor. This is Virginia, right? The other idea had to do with gentility, breeding, character, and good conduct. This was honor as virtue. The two ideals of honor as valor and honor as virtue were interwoven in a creed that had great force in the culture of Virginia. Honor was a hierarchical principle. A high-born gentleman had great honor. A yeoman had less honor, but was thought capable of behaving honorably. A servant had little honor, and a slave had none at all. But people of every rank were mindful of reputation in a way that, he says, does not exist in our modern world. But you can still feel it, right? It's like the people from that region have a feeling of honor.
So if a man lost his honor, he could be ostracized, but only if he were highborn.
Yeah, well, he says when Virginians misbehaved, they were punished by rituals of public humiliation. But they also shame them, same devices. But I think the power of it's different in Virginia from the way it is in New England. Because you're losing your honor, right?
Right.
Rather than your belonging. Puritan is about belonging. Virginia is about honor.
Yeah. Well, true, but Virginia was also a lot about people had a lot of money and they wanted to continue to make it. If you lost your honor, who was going to make any kind of business dealings with you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So this was very dangerous to your family. It wasn't just about humiliation, and it was about you're going to lose your livelihood.
Right. But so when you start describing this when you start describing these things to people and you start realizing you got this in your gut and you really, really, really believe these things are true, you can't argue with them. And so if you're trying to argue with someone from Yankeedom, and trying to talk them out of a feeling of belonging, don't expect to have a happy day.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of their triggers will hit because, oh my gosh, I might get kicked out, right?
It's panic.
There's
it's
an absolute panic, right?
Right, which is why people will try to wield that against other people, because it works so effectively with themselves.
Yes.
So they assume it's going to work on other people.
Right.
And oftentimes it does, not always, but
not with the Scots
but
Irish.
That's what's driving them.
It does. No,
Yeah.
Okay, so Quakers, right? The Quakers are they're the community of tolerance, right? Absolutely, all of our powerful language of tolerance comes from this region, and
Yes.
these arguments. But they do have honor. So, for example, a Quaker's honor was far removed from the code of chivalry that existed among Virginia gentlemen. It was also not the same as the contractual code that was kept by New England's specially elected saints. Instead, it was a reputation for Christian love, peace, good neighborhood, godliness, and doing good to others. I mean, this, you can feel this, right? If like one of these things cancel each other out. There's a reason we have different states. Because these people settled in they're still where there's almost nobody else around because they hate each other so much. They came in 4 great waves of migration, settled in completely different regions, pushed each other out. New Englanders hated the Quakers, humiliated and shamed them and pushed them out because the Quakers just wouldn't behave, right?
The Quakers had a nasty habit of trying to evangelize the Puritans, for which they were brutalized.
Right.
They weren't.
But they're all about nice love and tolerance, right? Why can't you hate a Quaker?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was their destruction too. They were so open. They were almost incapable of seeing danger.
Right.
But they should have seen it.
Right. And they have to invite the Scots Irish in to fight for them because they won't.
Yeah. And then they pushed them as far
Braveheart has this reality, right? It's like
they just did not fit with their Quaker society. They were rowdy and uncouth and had very strange courtship rituals that they didn't trust. They had a right not to trust them. Had to do with kidnapping.
So from the Highlands, you get the Greater Appalachians, the backcountry, clannishness, right? Feud, Hatfield and McCoys are real, and everything that Mark Twain puts in Huckleberry Finn, right, about the feuds. These clans fostered an exceptionally strong sense of loyalty, which a modern sociologist has called amoral familialism, from the ethical perspective of his own historical moment. It's 1958. In its own time and place, it was not amoral at all, but a moral order of another kind, which recognized a special sense of obligation to kin. And the thing is, I think the strong sense of kin, it's the kinfolk that really matter, comes from this group, not quite in the same way as from the Puritans or the Quakers, right? Because the Quakers are all about brotherly love, right?
Right, because the Quakers and the Puritans were both driven by a religious ideal, whereas the Borderlanders, the Scots Irish, they were just driven from their land,
Right. And they came over as clans, and they live in
they had each other.
They live in mobile homes because those look like the kinds of houses they had in Scotland.
It does, because they're temporary. They know not to build something permanent. It's just going to get burnt down.
Right.
Or flooded and left to rot.
Right. And their property. So Rogue Wave is saying William Penn treated the Indians quite well. Yes. And the Scots Irish both fight them and marry them, right? So it's
they're either going to fight them or marry them or both.
Americans end up calling themselves Americans because they marry the Cherokee, who are the natives, right? And then fight them and then marry them. Okay. And they become kinfolk, right? So this is the sort of problem of this. The what matters in this is what's his name? Webb. I forgot his first name. The fighting what have I named? He was this congressman, right? Jim Webb, right? Has written a really good book about this culture. Most of our military culture comes from these people, right? So like my family, the 2-star general, Lee William Fulton, I was in, he was in Army, and then he became a founding Air Force career officer. I showed his picture to Pete Hegseth. Pete appreciated the 2 stars, right? So,
Sure.
the very strong military tradition from this region is why all of our military bases are down there. Most of our fighting force comes from the South. It's these families, right? With this incredible sense of you stand for the family and then you fight each other and then stand for the family, right?
Yeah.
Scots, they drink it, right? Okay. Moral obligation. That imperative was a way of dealing with a world where violence and disorder were endemic, because Britain, right, in the English, Braveheart, right? Long after it had lost its reason for being, family loyalty retained its power in the American backcountry. An example was the persistence of the family feud, which continued for many centuries in the Southern Highlands. These feuds flowed from the fact that families in the borderlands and backcountry were given moral properties which belonged mainly to individuals in other English-speaking cultures. Chief among them were the attributes of honor and shame. When one man forfeited honor in the backcountry, the entire clan was diminished by his loss. When one woman was seduced and abandoned, all her menfolk shared the humiliation. Justified, got that? It's in that region.
Yeah.
the television series, right? Although it's filmed in California, the trees are wrong. Okay.
I know, it looks so funny. It's supposed to be Kentucky. I'm like, I've been to both places. That's not Kentucky.
MASH is filmed around there too, in Southern California, right? It's not Korea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The feuds of the border and the backcountry rose mainly from this fact. When Devil Anse Hatfield was asked to explain why he had murdered so many McCoys, he answered simply, "A man has a right to defend his family." And when he spoke of his family, he meant all Hatfields and their kin. Okay, so this is like this definition of the nation is the family. You start hearing that, you're talking to these people. The backcountry folkway was strikingly similar to the customs of the borderers. Yeah. Yeah. I met Hexeth, yes. I went on the National Review cruise and he was there and we were having a conversation. This was in 2015, right? 10 years ago. And I don't remember why I was talking to him, but military stuff came up. He's a big advocate for the veterans, right? And I said, well, I come from, and I showed him my grandfather's formal portrait in the Air Force website. And he's like, that was all, he said 2 stars. And I'm like, how can I be proud of this? And it's like, he got it, right? It's like, yes.
Yeah.
Fulton, Lee William Fulton, the general, which is why, okay, and this actually is totally topical. The reason I know all this stuff about my family is my grandfather looked it up, right? Long before Ancestry.com or any of this stuff happened, he went around talking to people and he found all of this lineage. He didn't find my grandmother's lineage because that was his wife's family and they were from Germany, right? But he found the Fulton lineage, including through the Hawkins stuff, because that's what you do if you're kinfolk, right? So we know the Fulton lineage pretty well because grandfather Fulton, the general, wrote to everybody and found it, right? So
that's cool.
Yeah. I can do this in pentameter. Well, anyway. Okay. So our Poland balls, right? Our sub Poland balls. How many more Poland balls do I have in this? Oh, we go to World Ball next, right? We'll go to World Ball because we're talking about Poland balls, right? So the Poland balls are trying to express something of this, but what Fischer shows, I think, in a pretty excruciatingly demonstrative detail because of the way he studied all the records. And he's done other books, right? This is only one of his books. He did a more recent one on the slave traditions, the traditions that come from the people that were brought here in slavery and how they've influenced different folkways and parts of our country. It's harder to tell because they don't have the same backstory that the English speaking people had. He's done one on New Orleans, I believe.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if he did any of the Germans, right? And that, as we showed from our migration map last time, the Germans come in. So in fact, the New Mexico story has interesting sub-layers about Germans because the Germans also go to Mexico and train their army. And apparently
just like ours.
The army that the Americans fight in the Mexican-American War is trained by Prussians.
Well, so is our army, our Continental Army.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they're Hessians, right? Not Prussians. Yeah. Those are different regions.
No, I was thinking of Steuben.
Okay.
Von Steuben.
Yeah.
But yeah, they get around.
The Germans, they really did. So the sort of the we go back to that migration map, and then you start feeling like, so what okay, one, folkways. When people move, they bring all these folkways with them. The mystery of nation is how you become so embedded in these folkways that it does not seem like these are propositional, options, right? It's just true. This is the way men and women behave. This is the way you should behave, in society. This is what government is like, right? And they're grounded in, I mean, the sort of who belongs and who doesn't is also part of the folkway of how you can bring people in or not. So clearly the people that don't have the same problems with immigration as some of the ones who do have different expectations about what makes a community. And that's the kind of argument that we're constantly, well, the New Englanders say belonging, that matters. If they belong and they behave, that counts, right? Whereas the backcountries are saying, well, they're not kin. What are you talking about?
Right. Their concept is blood first before anything else.
Right. And if you have to behave for the family, but other stuff is but you got to defend your family. So the Germans, the pink line on this migration map, more of them that should have shown more of them also going to Mexico, but I'm not quite sure how many. It shows some of them going to Brazil, right? But this huge German migration, which when I showed you Michael Jones the Colin Woodard map, he said, "We're the Germans, right? We're the Irish, right?" There's other big significant migration populations that add to, I mean, what Woodard argues is these, and I think, Woodard argues that these nations, I'm going back to the nations map, are fixed enough that, for example, I was saying Chicago still has the New England Yankeedom expectations about community and things like that. But we talked last time about how each of the regions feels different. So, where these folkways come from, because they're very durable. Fisher is showing that they go back centuries, right? And the archaeology of England, that region, England, has shown that, in fact, those family populations were very, very stable. They came in the 6th century. They stayed there until they left for, New England. That there's not as much mixing around regionally in England as you would think until they all moved to London, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the regional differences, they can go back centuries, right? American history, this is obviously the takeaway that I want you guys to get. American history is medieval history. We're still living with things that developed in the regions in the Middle Ages where all of these immigrants came from. And, it's not just English versus Spanish. It's all of these layers of town government, shame and honor, language, clothing styles, whether you wear bright colors or pale colors, right? All of this is very, very ancient, and yet been kind of alchemized in whatever's going on in the history that we're living through right now.
Yeah, what I find fascinating is that when we've spoken about this before, there's been so much movement of people in the United States away from their regions that their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, but they brought their culture, they brought these traditions, they brought the way they spoke with them.
Yes. And
so you can pick up clues to where, to what group somebody belongs to in the way they talk and what they celebrate. I just saw it, and I don't live in New Orleans, but my local grocery store, somebody was selling a king cake. I'm like, that's just Louisiana.
Right.
Nobody else does that.
Right.
How did it get all the way over here? Right. Well, obviously, because there was this huge diaspora specifically after the hurricane.
Oh,
right?
okay.
After Katrina. And that's my guess. Right. But because I can't imagine why else it would be there,
Well, so this raises a good question of, like, how long do certain things last, right? Cookies. Americans are famous for cookies. Well, cookies are Dutch, right? And so that cookiness is coming from New Amsterdam. But on the other hand, it's like growing up with the Scots-Irish background that I do and the German, and then, but are we still German when we can't remember that we are? Or do we have, like, food that we expect to, like, well, that's what you eat in such and such a situation, and that's ordinary food. And I grew up eating chili, for goodness sake, because we were in New Mexico, and my mother's family was in Texas, right? So how long can these folkways last without being able, we came from New Orleans, we brought the king cake. What if you forgot where the cake came from?
And so here's the weird thing: chili's an English Texas invention because they dried and ground it into powder and used it. And that was something only the English were doing. That was not something that,
Very good.
yeah.
Well, all that southern fried food, it's actually Scots. I looked it up.
Which is actually the batter stuff actually comes from Portugal.
Oh,
Portuguese.
phooey. This is
They
hilarious.
did.
It's great.
It
No,
got
this
brought
is
into England and Ireland. That's fish and chips, battered fishes from Portugal. They brought it to England, and the English brought it to Ireland, and then the Portuguese also brought it to Japan. That's where tempura comes from. It's all Portuguese.
Oh, that's great. Tempura's
Yeah.
Portuguese.
Yes.
You've made my evening. Right. So are the Japanese Portuguese? Because they eat tempura?
Well, some of their food is. Yeah.
Okay. The Polandballs are here in the world, right? They clearly exist. We clearly have some sense of what they are. But the dynamic process of generating a Polandball, so that you know we are a nation, if you make the kin claim, I can guarantee you, to bet on it, right? Kin is a male relation. Kin is the group, right? Kinfolk, right? Kin is the family relationship, and they seem to go both male and female lines. Although Fischer will talk through how exactly, like the Spanish famously add their names together so that you end up with these incredibly long names because you're adding both your mother's and your father's family. So your sense of whether or not it's your kin is like my grandfather. He found all the women too, all the marriages and such. He just didn't include his own wife in his researches. But so like that the Hawkins family that we came through is a daughter or a great granddaughter who came to Virginia and then married. But the feeling of we're Fultons, like, my father was like, we're Fulton because we're, from Scotland, and he loved, Mel Gibson and Braveheart until he watched it and then like, no, that's not the way battle happened. Right. But the storytelling about who we are, it's like it has to be regenerated at some point, which is what people are, scared about. Like, we're losing our sense of nation if you blend too much into the stories of the new place. What happens when you've moved around so much that you don't really exist anymore as a story entity?
Well, I don't know that you don't. Well, I mean, your story just expands, doesn't it?
Well, this is why I love history, right?
Yeah, right. It gets more complicated, but that's more interesting.
Except for, I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of people quote Albion Seed, and certainly when Colin Woodard's book came out, and what I was realizing, as a lot of other people were in 2015, 2016, was Greater Appalachia was voting for Trump, right? And the hate that was like poured on the people that were voting for him it's
nasty.
It was the usual hate. I mean, that's where J.D. Vance was writing Hillbilly Elegy, right? It's the usual hate poured on those people ever since for the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
And ever since the very beginning, right on the border between Scotland and England.
Yes.
Nothing's changed.
No. You hated us then, you hate us now.
and people never even question it. People who think they're like, egalitarian minded and fair minded and will think nothing of using pejoratives to describe people that come from one area of the country. It's like their dumping ground. It's like their intellectual dumping ground. I never understood that.
Well, they've hated them since before they got here, right? So, I mean,
but that doesn't even make any sense to me. I don't understand that inherited hatred.
Okay, why do the Polandballs not get along?
Why do the Polandballs get along?
No, why don't all the Polandballs just get along? Why can't they? I mean,
why can't we all just
why can't all the Polandballs just get along, right? One of the interesting things that Fischer also does is do some numbers, which I forget where is in the book. The greatest migration came from the backcountry, the borderlands that goes to the backcountry. It's like 250,000 people. The Puritan group is more like 40,000. The Wessex group is again another 40. The Midlanders maybe a bit less than that, I think. There's a lot of, I mean, it's like most of the Highland, most of the backcountry, it's Highland, Fultons were from the lowlands. They emptied it to run sheep up there, right? They kick all the people out, right? We're worried about, it's like, pray for North Carolina, right? Their families were kicked out of the borderlands centuries ago for sheep, right? And now it's like if those are engineered floods, or if, it's all, energy weapons or something like that, they did it to them first when they were
Yeah.
running them all off the lands in the
Which, as
borderlands.
we said earlier, is why they don't build permanent structures, right? Traditionally.
Traditionally, right? Because, well, they're cattle raiders, but they're also expecting to be in both their own feuds and the feuds that are being affected by. So Rogue Wave is
Mhm.
saying, I must reiterate, music, song, poetry needs to be emphasized as a strong nation building element. I mean, from my perspective, it defines it, right? How do you know you belong to one of the Poland balls? You tear up when you hear the song that goes with your Poland
That's
ball.
true. Yeah.
Right?
The Battle Hymn of the Republic will make me tear up every time I try to sing it. I can't sing it.
The singing Poland balls will
Yeah.
tell us. Acadians originally from Kid. Okay, so hopefully it's like that you guys, thank you for hanging out with us. To be continued in the sense of, we I think we made our Poland ball point. This is good. Thank you for bearing
Yeah.
with us. And if Fischer shows you the difficult, it's like each one of these American nations of the four has a whole, like, the Poland ball is really, really rich all by itself, right? And then every single one on this big map of 2021 Poland balls, that's when I pulled it up, right? Any one of these Poland balls will have that level of complexity, right? All of them. It doesn't matter whether they're like this big or this big.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what country they're in. It's pretty much the same story over and over again. They're very complex.
They're very
histories.
complex. And they will have different convictions about what makes them themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that the kinfolk argument will not feel as strong in Quakerland. It just won't.
No.
It's not going to be the same.
Mm-mm.
And the belonging argument is incredibly powerful for the people from Yankeedom. The hierarchy argument is incredibly powerful for the people from Virginia. And it's at these like gut level, heart level convictions that we end up in our political debates. And what the great service Fischer did was say, I mean, he's so sweet at the end. It's like, they're all American, right? But I mean, he does try at the end to say all of our four freedom ways have, brought together what we are, but it's not really persuasive in the long run because we're still fighting.
Are we fighting more now than we were in 1989 when this book was published? I think maybe we are.
I think people have used the regional difference. I don't think they did it on purpose from him, but I think some of the regional differences have been intensified and some have been forgotten.
Well,
and some have been ridiculed. And yeah,
the worst offender now is not New England; it's California. Their politicians, at least, are the smuggest on earth.
Well, let's homework, everybody. Trace their families, right? Figure out what regional cultures they're actually expressing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you dig down into there, and it's a fun exercise. It's a fun exercise because you start understanding why we don't get along.
My guess is that most of the political class, and I do want to differentiate the political class in California from the population.
Oh, definitely.
They're great. The politicians are awful. And my guess is that a lot of them came from the Northeast back in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Very likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. That's a clue.
It's a clue. To look for the clues. Yeah. And love your Poland ball. Because I think they make plushies. I'm going to have to get a set of plushie Poland balls.
Oh yeah, I got to get an American Poland ball.
America, how do you know you're a nation? You've got a plushie Poland ball. Okay, that's the Poland ball question. I hope some of it makes a little more sense. We will continue this question of why these I think it's not just they're categories. Why the Poland balls have such power over us. To be continued. Great stream. Oh, thank you, Rogue Wave. Thank you. We aim to please and clarify and all of those other things. Okay, links are all in the description. Subscribe to our newsletter. We'll put a link in. I did a bunch of blog posts ages ago on what I learned from Fischer. I'll put them in the newsletter tomorrow. And to be continued. Love your Poland balls.